Hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and today, the 1st of October 2022, marks the beginning of Victober. This is a month-long read-along hosted by Katie of Books and Things, Kate Howe, Marissa of Blatantly Bookish, Petra of Petra U, and Roz of Scallydandling about the books, and is about celebrating Victorian literature. Ordinarily, I would be in work today, but for the last 2 days I have had to phone in sick. Today, I actually got up and showered before being quickly felled by whatever this issue is upon my chest. Which is making it incredibly difficult to stand up for long periods of time, and actually constantly feels like I'm walking against some sort of wall. So all I've done so far today is read the first 150 pages of Framley Parsonage, and then my mother woke up and wanted to watch the second Halloween Town film, and so we did that. Charlie of Charlie Brooke says I shouldn't feel guilt about having to take time off when I'm ill, but it's just the type of person I am. I'm spending most of my time hating the fact that whatever's wrong with me is wrong with me anyway, and also feeling guilt at having to take the time off work. It's rather irksome to me, actually. Anyway, Framley Parsonage. It's been fantastic to return to Barchester and to hear about the goings on there. It's been like, for whatever reason, this novel has felt a lot like gossip. We have Lady Lufton, and she has all these machinations going on. And then you have the character of... Oh, I'm going to call him Mark, but I want to be sure about this. It's Mark. I don't know why I was doubting myself. So Mark is her son's best friend from childhood, and she has basically, throughout her life, organised everything as such that the world is working how she wants it to work. Mark is the vicar at a church, and he started hanging around with who Lady Lufton deems to be an unsuitable set. His father has recently died, which has meant he's taken on caring for his younger sister, Lucy. And he's also entered into some financial deals that might not be good for him. And it's very entertaining to see this man who really ought to know better not know better. And I am very much enjoying Trollope's heroines in this book. There have been some fine lines so far, indeed, in the 150 pages I have read so far. Lady Lufton is against a certain person beginning a relationship with her son, and this woman has responded that rather than admonish her for speaking to Lady Lufton's son, surely her son should have been marked as dangerous. And there is just some great wit in here, and it feels very much of a matriarchal society within this novel. Obviously they are still confined by Victorian norms and society, but it's the way that they go about things showing their own powers. One thing that I am noticing is some anti-Semitism. I noticed it in The Way We Live Now, and I noticed it in here, but I don't know whether it is anti-Semitism or whether Trollope is trying to challenge that. He definitely challenges certain ideas about colonialisation in here, with the Christians going off to Papua New Guinea and to try and force the people there to accept their religion, and it does discuss that. So I'm unsure whether Trollope was criticising that, but I have realised I read about a page a minute, and at 496 pages I have got 5 hours worth of reading here. I don't think I'm reading it all today. I have written down the page numbers of every single book that I have to read, and found that if I read 180 pages per day, I should be able to get through a lot of them. I don't much work with that prescriptive sort of reading. I have decided that I want to read maybe one Victorian book and one modern book each week, and usually I'd read 3 a week, but I read a bit slower when it comes to Victorian literature, and also my reading has slowed down somewhat recently. My plans for the rest of today are to continue to not move from the chair that I've been inhabiting downstairs, or my bed, and yeah, it's not good for Sally. She's not getting walked because I simply don't have the fortitude to do so. This isn't how I thought to start Victober, but at least I'm enjoying the book that I'm reading. Neighbours' dogs barking in the background, but we'll just have to contend with that today. It's Monday, and yet again I have rang in ill to work due to the fact that I still have this ongoing chest issue, which yesterday I made a mistake. Sally hasn't been for a walk since Wednesday. This descent into illness happened whilst I was chatting to Charlie for the author interview last week, and throughout it she kept saying to me that I clearly had a cold, and I was disputing it, saying it was just allergies. And if you watch the video, I realised afterwards you can actually see my descent into illness. The universe told me on Wednesday not to go for a walk, and then I thought, well, I'll go for a light walk down the towpath. And Sally wasn't for walking because my mum had dropped us off, and she's very much pack-minded, so as soon as she realised my mother wasn't there, she didn't want to walk anymore. Yet I persevered, and the first bridge we came to, there was a man on top of it singing Harry Styles' Falling, which was fun, and I was concerned because he was on top of a railway bridge, but I also live in an area that's renowned for folk who have a fondness for drugs, so I didn't know what to do in the situation. Anyway, keep walking. We don't complete the walk because I get towards the end of it, not even the bridge I usually turn back at, and I hear two people having a blazing row, and I don't go in for any sort of drama, so I just turned back and walked away, and then stayed home with my bad chest, feeling even more sorry for myself, getting even more annoyed because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't walk from, well, I still can't properly, but I couldn't walk from the living room to the kitchen without being utterly exhausted. I'm off work, and yesterday I thought, well, we'll test myself. We'll see how well I am, because I felt sorry for my dog as well, and Charlie was saying to take it easy, and a friend of mine was saying that maybe I shouldn't, and I was like, well, we got to just give it a go, just a light stroll. Well, the walk took me 20 minutes longer than usual. I was overtaken by a pair of OAPs, and I thought like I could collapse by the time I got home, so it was a mistake, and I ended up paying for it last night because I ended up feverish, unable to sleep, and unable to breathe, so it was not fun at all, really. I mean, illness is never fun, but I deny when I'm ill. The reason I got a chest infection in 2019 is because I refused to admit that I had tonsillitis, and I refused to admit I had pharyngitis, and eventually just ruined everything by getting this infection and just putting myself out of action for a month. So I haven't read yet, and I was in such a maudlin mood yesterday that there was no point coming to chat to you or chat about what I read, because there isn't much to discuss in terms of Framley Parsonage or any of the other reading that I'm doing, which should be some of the more modern books, but that hasn't happened yet. In terms of Framley Parsonage, I'm finding myself reminded a lot of Dr. Thorne, and I said last year when I finished Dr. Thorne, the blurb of Framley Parsonage sounded similar to Dr. Thorne, and I'm finding that a lot. Lady Lufton doesn't like Lucy and doesn't believe she's a suitable wife for her son. We have the same thing going on with the Greshams and Mary Thorne in Dr. Thorne, and they've actually appeared in this book, and I like that. The Greshams and Mary Thorne appeared. It was nice to have that crossover. It does feel like I'm reliving some of Trollope's other plots. Mark is getting himself into money worries, and I've just read all of that with Felix in The Way We Live Now, except to compare the two, Mark seems a little more naive when it comes to the world of finance and giving people credit and all this sort of thing. I'm just wondering, are love and money two of Trollope's themes that he will navigate towards more than usual? I still very much enjoy Trollope's prose, and there's this homely quality to it. It's almost like it's just cozy. That's the word for it. It's, if you took an Agatha Christie and you removed the crime, well, you removed the murder, I think that you and just had like this cozy village story, then I feel like you'd like these books. I feel like if you liked Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell, then Framley Parsonage is perhaps the closest to that, for the fact that there's a lot of women gossiping and chatting in this, and whilst there are a lot of men in the book as per, it does feel like the women have more of a voice, and it's very interesting in the grand scheme of things in terms of what Trollope is discussing in terms of whether one ought to marry for love or one ought to marry for money, and dissecting all of that. And there was a brilliant passage earlier about the seasons turning into spring and into April, and I very much appreciated how he'd written that. I had hoped to read 180 pages per day, and yesterday I woke up really late. I don't like... One, I have insomnia, so I don't usually sleep anyway, so but also I don't like to wake up after 9, and not getting up till 10 yesterday started the day on a bad note for me anyway. But I ended up watching Murdoch Mysteries and Death in Paradise with my mother. Then I went on this ill-fated walk, and when I came home I ended up watching The Muppets Haunted Mansion over tea. And when that finished, because I was so exhausted, rather than read, I sat through a Hallmark Christmas movie, I think it's a Hallmark anyway, with my mother, entitled Next Stop Christmas, which is basically another take on A Christmas Carol. And I find this a lot, that with these Hallmark style Christmas movies, it's always a woman having to regret the fact that she's a career woman, and I hate it. I need in one of these films, and I said it last year, for them to accept that a person, well, a woman, is able to have a career and have a relationship at the same time. They aren't mutually exclusive. They can intertwine with each other, and that if a man is able to hold a relationship and keep a job, then why can't you have the same for a woman? Why does she always have to give up some part of herself? I don't know. But I will say, this did a good job of showing that the protagonist did have a realisation, and I didn't hate it too much. But I was also entirely exhausted and ill, so not going to comment on whether this was a good film or not. Because it's light-hearted viewing, isn't it? And you know everything's going to turn out well in the end. It's why I can never watch dramas when I'm ill. It's why I've got to navigate towards comedies. Can't even go for some Disney films some of the time because they're just like harrowing. Yeah, you don't want to be watching Pocahontas when you're poorly. Maybe you do. I can't, it just upsets me. Anyway, I didn't expect to ramble for 10 minutes. It's really affected this sore throat, but I do like to be beside the sea, so I do like to be beside the sea, but I would like to disappear and maybe read some more, since that's kind of the whole point of the vlog, and I only talked about Anthony Trollope for about 2 seconds. Oh, anyway, yeah, ta-ra. It's Tuesday, and I'm actually feeling mildly better today. I won't deny some disappointment at not having finished Framley Parsonage yet, because I have been laid up in bed. It's given me a lot more time than I expected at the start of October. But for whatever reason, I haven't. I find that I have been allowing myself to get distracted by other things, films, and Duolingo, but I do wonder whether I'm settling for mindless tasks, which is why I'm not watching these hugely involved things. Either way, I am now 350 pages into Framley Parsonage, and part of me wants to finish it today so that I can say that I'm done with it, but part of me wonders about just allowing it to run over until tomorrow and just doing 100 pages each day until I finished. We'll see how I feel later on today. But I would like to get to some of the other books, and I did work out that I need to read 180 pages a day if I want to read every book on my TBR. I mentioned yesterday how I was glad that I had got to see some of the characters from Dr. Thorne, and in the pages I read afterwards, the Greshams ended up having a rather significant scene, and we did get to see Dr. Thorne again, and I was glad to have that link. This book does still feel almost like a rehash of the plot points that we got in Dr. Thorne, and I can't compare the two in my mind, because this one has the financial issues that Dr. Thorne had. However, the financial issues are related to somebody else. And I know that I discussed how I think that Trollope has money on the mind a lot within his fiction. I saw it a lot in The Way We Live Now. I've now seen it in Dr. Thorne. And I think that it is a very prominent issue and has been for a while. One thing that I liked yesterday was this quote I came across, which was when somebody was criticising the public and criticising the government and the fact that the ministers are constantly changing. And it felt almost like the chaos that we're seeing nowadays with our government was happening however many years ago this was. And I am still very much enjoying the conversations that the female characters are having. There is a wit there and a humour, and they are polite, but polite in a way that can sometimes still have these barbs hidden, and I very much appreciate that, and I think that Trollope is onto a winner there. So when I compare this against Dr. Thorne, I prefer those conversations, but in terms of like looking at the grand scheme of things, I like Framley Parsonage for its connections to the other books in the series that we've seen go before, and it almost feels like they're connecting now, whereas before they just felt like books that were set in the same place without any real idea as to how they connected with one another. I do get frustrated with this book though. It's one of those where a lot could have been solved in the last 2 chapters, but I still have 150 pages to get through. And I don't know whether Trollope is doing this on purpose, whether Trollope wants to explore the entire gamut of these themes until he can wrap them up and he wants to explore the characters further. But I do find myself being like, sorry, Sally's here. I do find myself feeling a little like, come on now, I understand who your characters are, I understand the story, we all know where this is going to go. Can we just sort it out a bit faster, please? But I understand Trollope wanting to take his time. You know, look at me with the most recent book I wrote and wanting to make sure everything was properly resolved. So we'll see how I feel when I finish the book. But currently, despite really enjoying the time that I'm spending with these characters, I do wonder whether it isn't just a little bit long, a little bit too long. I very much recommend Trollope's Barsetshire books. There is something delightful and homely about them, and it's quaint. It's quaint in a way that whilst there are some double dealings going on and you're getting to see the naivety of Mark Roberts, and I think it's very interesting to compare Mark Roberts in this book and everything that he's done in terms of giving credit to people against Felix Carberry, and this look into the fact that a lot of these rich people actually have no money at all. It's all spent, but they're getting by accepting credit from others, and then people are buying that credit and causing people to actually lose everything. It's very interesting if you were to compare Mark Roberts and Felix Carberry, because Felix understood, this is one of the main characters in The Way We Live Now, he understood exactly what he was doing. Mark has no idea what he's getting into. He has had affiliations with the richer people, and Lady Lufton looks upon him almost like another son. But it seems as though he hasn't had the necessary training to recognise when he's being taken for a mug. It's definitely interesting, having finished The Way We Live Now, to then go back and read Framley Parsonage. However, at the same time, it is going over a lot of themes that Trollope is known to have gone for in other books. So I don't know. We'll see. As I say, we'll see how I feel when I finish it. But as I was feeling mildly better today, I had hoped not to overface myself and try a light stroll. I probably should have waited today all along, because we know that I had that major setback in terms of health after walking on Sunday. But it's raining, and Sally hates the rain. She went outside because I was showing her that it's throwing it down, and she was not impressed. She was not impressed, but I also know that she's getting a bit fed up as well. But these things happen, and I'm sure we'll be back jaunting around the forest sooner rather than later. I finished reading Framley Parsonage last night. If you can hear my brother or my dad in the background, I apologise. It's pouring down with rain today, so there's not really much doing and we're all at home. Apart from the mother, she's out at work. So, Framley Parsonage, I wrote a review on Instagram about this. It is somewhat reminiscent of Dr. Thorne in its plot, in that we have a young woman interested in a man and his mother disapproves. In Dr. Thorne, it was Frank Gresham and Mary Thorne, and here it is Lord Lufton and Lucy Roberts. The only difference being that Lucy Roberts is more forthright and is definitely the kind of character I hoped that Mary would turn out to be, because she does say, well, if this man's mother doesn't want me to marry him, I'm not going to do it, because I know what society will think of me and I can't be doing with that. And she very much knows what society will think of her, but still does what she wants to do. And that's something I didn't expect of a heroine in a Victorian novel, and I was pleased to see it here. One thing that I did like about this book is how many female characters are brought to the forefront of this narrative, even when it's just Mrs. Proudie going and having a chat with some of the other female characters, and they're gossiping about stuff or they're chatting, and you have these wry asides, but they really help to build up the sense of this community and the webs that are being woven in the background of these stories that we perhaps might not have noticed in the earlier books, but are coming to some sort of head here, especially as we did get to see Mary Thorne and Frank Gresham again, although Mary is now Mrs. Gresham, which was difficult for me to get my head around. And we also get to see Dr. Thorne again. I'm pretty sure as well that one of the lawyers that we have mentioned has featured in The Way We Live Now. And I'm appreciating these connections that Trollope is making to his other work. And it very much makes me look forward to where the rest of the Barsetshire books are going to go. But I really did like Lucy's character, and I think that this book says a lot about relationships, and it does actually discuss whether a person ought to marry for love or ought to marry for money, or what the other person is bringing into the relationship, finance-wise or inheritance-wise. And a lot of Trollope's work that I've read recently, I say this, I'm talking about The Way We Live Now. The Way We Live Now is a huge book, and a big preoccupation within that novel is about money and is about everybody constantly borrowing off each other. And that book was written, I believe, 13 years after Framley Parsonage. And in Framley Parsonage, we do have the character of Mark Roberts making mistakes financially, and he chooses to give credit to somebody and not knowing that this person isn't really to be trusted, because he gets credit off everybody. And unfortunately this comes back to bite Mark, and you have to contrast that really with the story. Well, no, I realised last night when I was thinking about this book, you have this character of Mr. Sowerby who is going around and getting all this credit of people, and then you have this character of Mr. Crawley who represents a different type of man who, despite the fact that he is struggling financially, he is also incredibly proud and refuses to get into any sort of debt, or refuses to accept the help of others because of what it might mean in the future. And then you have Mark Roberts in the middle, who is a kind man, who represents really Mr. Crawley, or Mr. Crowley's sort, but he's maybe aspiring to things that he doesn't properly understand. And so you have this representation of three different types of men and finances, and maybe trying to figure out, well, what is it best to be as a human? Are you best to live on credit but still have all of these rich things? You know, like it talks at one point about how the richest man will go on omnibuses and eat the finest foods even though he has no money at all and is living off credit, whereas the man with no money has to abstain from all of that regardless as to whether he came by the money or not. And yeah, it's interesting to compare those characters against one another within this novel, especially as the majority of this novel seems rather parochial in tone and definitely feels more, not captivating, it was rather fast to get through. Admittedly, last night I did put the audiobook on and just sat in my bed for, oh no, I didn't sit in my bed then. Did I? No, I didn't sit in my bed then. I put the audiobook on for an hour as I went about business, and that ended up turning into 2 hours because I was rather enjoying the process of listening to the audiobook, but I always have to finish the book reading it. So for the final 3 chapters, gone into bed, Jazz for Reading playlist on, and read those final 3 chapters, and I very much liked the way that the novel ended, and I liked Framley Parsonage, and in the end I did see it as being quite similar to Dr. Thorne, but it also felt like a continuation of theme, and there was a lot of connection there. And as I say, there were a lot of webs being woven by the characters and also by the author, and it did make me interested to see where this story is going to go. But I'm also going to withhold reading The Small House at Ellington and maybe read that hopefully next month. Or we just leave it for another year. We'll see how that goes. But it feels like a treat to return to Barchester. I don't know what it is. There's just something within the pages that when I read The Warden all those years ago, I did not expect it to reach this point in Framley Parsonage. It's always nice to see these connections building, and it does make me wonder where the tale is going to go. Either way, I would recommend Framley Parsonage. I would recommend the entirety of the Barsetshire series, and quite honestly, we have yet to have an Anthony Trollope book that I have not liked. But saying that, I also have plans to read the Belton Estate this month, so everything could get thrown out of the window now that I've said that. This morning I awoke early simply because I was extremely annoyed that I didn't wake up until 9:45 yesterday, and everybody can say to me, your body's ill, this is your way of getting over it, it's restorative. No, I have stuff to be getting on with. Anyway, I have listened to 2 chapters of North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Juliet Stevenson narrates the audiobook, and I might be sticking with the audiobook. I don't know what it is, but there's something about the narration of it that I find compelling through the audiobook. However, I might read some of this if the mood takes me that way. So far, not a lot has happened, but I have enjoyed Gaskell's prose, and it hasn't felt as difficult to get into as Sylvia's Lovers did when I read that way back when. Sorry, I'm currently looking at my shelf to see where Sylvia's Lovers should be, and it is not there. So, if I happened to mail my copy of Sylvia's Lovers to anybody, please let me know. I do this all the time. I forget who I've sent stuff to. Either way, North and South, much more easier to get into than the previous book, although not a lot of character development has happened yet. We've got to see a bit of a spark to Margaret Hale's character when she was in... Was she in a garden? She was chatting to somebody anyway. She was chatting to somebody and she had a bit of repartee with them, and I particularly like that. At the moment, couldn't tell you who it was because we're only 2 chapters in, and that amounts to 23 pages of this book. But I look forward to seeing how it goes. Otherwise, that's me for today. As I say, it's pouring down with rain today, so I'm not really going to be doing much other than reading. I don't know whether I'm going to go to a Poems and Pints event tonight. We will see. But for now, I will probably speak to thee tomorrow. It has been a long time since I recorded in this corner, which obviously, vlogging, back at work, just arrived after being off for over a week. Well, I only worked 3 days, and those 3 days that I was away, I was ill, not fun, didn't enjoy it. Now we're back. Continued to listen to North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell yesterday as I wandered into town for National Poetry Day, where I read a few poems. We did a poetry marathon as a writers group, and as I was walking, one of my headphones started working and not working today, so all of my audiobook plans out the window, and gonna have to read things the old-fashioned, new-fashioned way. Not a lot of hairspray in the hair today. Not sure I'm enjoying how it's looking today. So this'll be fun. Also arrived to work and looked at the books, and, well, people have been taking liberties whilst I haven't been here, because they're a mess. There are books in places books shouldn't go. Some aren't in alphabetical order. Some don't have a code on, so I don't even know what week they're for. And I'm pretty confident they've got the week wrong on some of them. So I gotta sort that this morning. That'll be fun. And then after that, plans will be to go home. And usually I don't read on the days that I'm in work. That's why I listen to the audiobooks on my way in and out. So we'll see if I do anything about that. Anyway, this jumper came out the wardrobe today. I don't know whether that's why I've been sneezing or whether I've just not had enough caffeine yet. I'm going to go and put the kettle on. And we'll see. Oh, I should probably say about North and South actually. Still liking it. However, I was probably going to move to the actual book anyway, because Juliet Stevenson has become rather soap opera actressy when it comes to the vocalisation of Margaret Hale, and it was growing rather irksome indeed. I've arrived home. Now, I wouldn't ordinarily talk to you again. Sorry. I'm hoping I've not developed a cold on the first day of going back to work, because that would be just great, wouldn't it? Being incredibly ill a week before, only to return to work and catch the manager's cold. but I hadn't actually seen her when I started sneezing. Sometimes when you work at a charity shop, you're dealing with some things that might not have seen a washing machine in a good old while. And we had one such bag today, well, several bags that absolutely reeked, and I think that they have kind of set off my allergies, which is fun. I'm looking for my hat because I am annoyed with my hair today. It keeps falling in my eyes, even though it's hairsprayed. But I'm here because towards the end of the day, someone came in and donated a load of poetry. And one book they donated was Goblin Market and Other Poems by Christina Rossetti. If you didn't know, Christina Rossetti is one of my favourite Victorian poets. I hope she's Victorian anyway, because I have been reading her for Victober for years. And this is a rather fine edition of the book indeed. Of course, it begins with Goblin Market, which I've read before. I heartily enjoy. And I am looking forward to going through this and revisiting some poems, perhaps finding some poems I didn't previously know about. That would always be good. But we now have some poetry for the poetry challenge. And then I also got Ben Ockrey's An African Elegy. I never knew that he wrote poetry. I knew about his Booker win, but never knew he wrote poetry. And I got The Wren Boys by Carol Ann Duffy, illustrated by Dermot Flynn, which is another one of her poems for Christmas time. I read one of these years ago, and so I will save this for one evening in December. This evening, I'm going to sit down with some Christina Rossetti. As I say, my headphones have stopped working, and poetry is easier to settle to when you don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to read some Christina Rossetti. I'm going to go downstairs and make some tea now, and I'm going to put my hat on, and hopefully I'm not going to be so nasal. Do you know, I'd hoped that for this vlog it would go from being ill and maudlin at the start of the week to being happy and well again at the end of the week. And, you know, we were heading towards happy and well on Wednesday and Thursday, and then we get to today, and I'm floored by this sneezing and coughing again. I don't know. I can't tell Charlie or Charlie Brooke either, because she'll say, "See, Charlie, I told you pushed yourself too hard." But, you know, friends can do that sort of thing. Anyway, I'll probably see you tomorrow. It's Saturday. So all I read last night was Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti, a favourite of mine ever since I discovered this poem as a teenager. Indeed, I was realising this week a lot of Victorian literature came up at school on these reading lists to read for my English literature class, but I don't think I read half the books on these reading lists, but I read Christina Rossetti. And I read it simply because it was called Goblin Market, and around the same time as I was doing my A-levels, I think that it was Sarah Rees Brennan had a book called The Demon Lexicon, and I read that trilogy of books. I believe there was a Goblin Market in there. If there wasn't, I can't remember who it was, but I reread it for, I couldn't say what time this was, but that is all I read from this collection, because I discovered a new to me TV show. A clip came up whilst I was waiting to start work yesterday on, you know, like an advert for BBC, and I liked it. It starred an actress who I like, Diane somebody. Diane Watchamahoosing, who is in Motherland and a few other TV shows that I like, and it's called Mandy. Now, a lot of people have already seen this show, and a lot of people have probably already like this show and know about it, but I quite liked this comedy that was a bit weird, about a woman who is maybe a little bit working class, who is on benefits, and to keep her benefits she's having to go for numerous jobs. Each episode was about 13 minutes, so naturally I watched the entirety of 2 series, which was 12 episodes plus a 16-minute Christmas special. You needed that extra 3 minutes just for Johnny Vegas. Anyway, so that was my evening. I was in absolute hysterics at series 1, episode 4 or 5. It had Sean Locke and involved fish. Headphones still aren't working. I need to reset them and start this whole process again, but this is what happens when you buy cheap headphones. And I did consider attaching my wired headphones as I drove, but I just felt like that would be adding an extra element of danger to my driving that we did not need. So I did not bring the headphones with me. I did not listen to any more of North and South, and I did not read any more of North and South, which is mildly disappointing to me, as I had hoped to read 3 books this week. However, I think that reading the entirety of Framley Parsonage and making a start on North and South, I am now 50 pages into that, and reading some poetry, is a good start to Victober. And over the next week I want to get started on my reread of Great Expectations, and what was the other one? I was also considering, I was going to do Great Expectations, or was I going to do Dorian Gray this week? I can't remember whether I was saving Dorian Gray for a bit closer to, Halloween. I'm trying to, garner some sense of this spookiness that everyone goes on about. But also, I'm not a big celebrator of Halloween. I talk about this all the time, If we were going out somewhere and we were sacrificing things to pagan gods, nothing that we particularly liked, I'd say maybe that's where we all went wrong. Maybe we were supposed to sacrifice certain people in power. I don't know, but I'm prepared to make that sacrifice. Actually, Guy Fawkes said the same thing, and look what happened to him. Remember, the 5th of November, it'll be here soon, Bonfire night. People have already been practicing with the fireworks, but that's a story for another day. I want to read some more Victorian books this week. I'm open to do so. I'm also going to be reading some more of the other books that I have on my TBR, but I don't talk about those in these videos. So, as it's a Saturday, this is usually where I end my vlogs. We take a Sunday off, and I catch up with you on Monday. So I think that's what I'm going to do. How has your first week of Victober gone? I started the week particularly ill, and I ended the week with cold symptoms again, which I don't know where they came from. Hopefully they've abated somewhat now, but it's autumn and I am an asthmatic with a poor immune system, so I am about to catch every single bug thrown my way. Yeah, what have you been reading this week? Have you enjoyed what you have read for Victober? I had great success with Framley Parsonage, very much enjoyed that, and North and South, I am very much enjoying Elizabeth Gaskell's prose. I look forward to reading more of that over the coming week. So yeah, let me know how your Victober's going, let me know what you're reading, and let me know what you're watching as well. We're always looking for an adaptation over here, and until next time, that is all.